Most people never notice this, but there's a certain kind of person who can leave a conversation and still be having it 3 hours later. The words have already been spoken. The moment has already passed. Everyone else has moved on. But somehow, their mind hasn't. They replay a sentence they said, then a facial expression, then a pause, then a different version of what they could have said instead. By the end of the night, they've had the same conversation 20 times, just with different endings. From the outside, it can look exhausting, maybe even irrational. People often respond with simple advice. Stop overthinking. Just let it go. You worry too much. As if the mind were a machine with an off switch. But what if that isn't what's happening at all? What if this habit that frustrates so many people isn't actually a flaw? What if it's a pattern? Because there's something important that often gets missed when people talk about overthinking. The assumption is that the mind is creating problems, but in many cases, the mind is trying to prevent them, and that changes everything. The truth is, people who think too much are often misunderstood, including by themselves. They assume their mind is working against them. Others assume they're making life harder than it needs to be. Yet psychology suggests something very different. There's often more going on beneath the surface than anyone realizes. Modern neuroscience describes the brain as a prediction machine. Long before something happens, your brain is already trying to anticipate it. It constantly scans for patterns. It estimates outcomes. It searches for mistakes before they occur. Most of this happens automatically, but some people seem to have a system that is slightly more sensitive. A mind that spends more time asking, what if? What did I miss? What could go wrong? At first glance, this looks like anxiety. But what psychology suggests is more nuanced. The brain isn't necessarily trying to create fear. It may be trying to create safety. Researchers have found that certain networks in the brain become more active when people reflect on the past, imagine the future, or analyze social situations. In everyday life, this can feel like endless mental noise. But underneath that noise is often a simple objective: preparation. The brain is trying to reduce uncertainty, and uncertainty is something many people experience very differently. This is where the story becomes more personal. Because people rarely develop these patterns in a vacuum. Most people assume overthinkers were simply born that way. Psychology suggests that experience plays a much larger role. Sometimes the habit develops in environments where mistakes carried emotional consequences. Maybe criticism arrived quickly. Maybe approval felt unpredictable. Maybe saying the wrong thing led to embarrassment. Maybe conflict appeared without warning. When experiences like these repeat often enough, the nervous system adapts. Not consciously, quietly, gradually. The brain learns that being prepared matters. It learns that details matter. It learns that small mistakes can become big problems. And so it begins preparing for everything. Not because it enjoys doing that, because somewhere along the way, preparation became associated with safety. This is why telling someone to simply stop overthinking often misses the point. The behavior exists for a reason. The mind believes it is helping, and in many ways, it is. But here's the paradox that most people never consider. The problem isn't always that overthinkers think more. The problem is often that they feel more responsibility for outcomes. When something matters, they don't just experience the event. They experience every possible version of the event, every possible consequence, every possible mistake, every possible future. What looks like excessive thinking is sometimes excessive responsibility. An attempt to prevent disappointment before it arrives. An attempt to protect people they care about. An attempt to avoid pain they've experienced before. And that creates an interesting trade-off. Because the same mind that notices risks often notices patterns. The same person who sees problems can also see connections. The same sensitivity that creates mental exhaustion can create unusual awareness. Many people who think deeply notice things others miss. Small shifts in mood, subtle changes in behavior, details that never seem important until later. Research on pattern recognition and attention suggests that some individuals naturally process information with greater depth and complexity. What most people assume is overanalysis. What psychology suggests is heightened monitoring. What might actually be happening is that the person is seeing more variables at once. But every strength comes with a cost, and this one can be surprisingly heavy. Because the same mind that identifies opportunities often identifies dangers. The same imagination that creates solutions can also create worst-case scenarios.
The same awareness that helps someone prepare can make it difficult to rest. A brain that is trained to search for potential problems rarely receives permission to stop searching, even when everything is okay, especially when everything is okay, because safety can feel temporary, and temporary things require monitoring, at least according to the nervous system. This is why some people feel exhausted by thoughts they never chose to have, not because they are weak, not because they lack discipline, but because their mind has spent years practicing vigilance, and anything practiced long enough begins to feel automatic. The interesting thing is that many overthinkers believe everyone experiences the world this way. They assume everyone replays conversations, everyone analyzes decisions, everyone imagines multiple futures before making a choice. But people differ more than they realize. Some minds prioritize speed, others prioritize certainty. Some move quickly through uncertainty, others try to understand it first. Neither approach is inherently better. Neither is inherently worse. They simply solve different problems. And that distinction matters. Because the goal is not to decide which type of mind is correct. The goal is to understand why your own mind works the way it does. When viewed through that lens, overthinking starts to look different. Less like a malfunction, more like an adaptation, a strategy that was learned, a system designed around protection, a nervous system attempting to stay one step ahead of discomfort. And whether that strategy is still useful in every situation is a different question entirely. But understanding where it came from changes the relationship you have with it, because it becomes easier to stop seeing yourself as the problem and start seeing the pattern. If you find yourself replaying conversations, imagining possibilities, and carrying thoughts long after everyone else has forgotten them, it may not be because your mind is working against you. It may be because your mind learned that safety comes from preparation. So it prepares. Again, and again, and again. Not because you are broken, because somewhere along the way, your brain learned that being ready mattered. And if this felt familiar, there may be another layer beneath it. Because for many people, overthinking isn't actually rooted in anxiety at all. It's rooted in something even deeper. The way the mind learns what it takes to feel safe in the first place.